Hello there, and welcome to the Psyche's Rest channel. Tonight, we're going to explore one of psychology's most enduring and illuminating frameworks for understanding the human personality. We'll wander through the landscape of what makes each of us uniquely ourselves, examining the traits that shape how we think, feel, and move through the world. This evening's journey takes us into the Big Five personality traits, sometimes known by the acronym OCEAN. These 5 broad dimensions have emerged from decades of research as the most scientifically validated way to describe the architecture of human personality. They're not boxes we fit into, but rather continuums we exist along, each person finding their own place on these spectrums. What we'll discover tonight might surprise you. The ways these traits shape everything from how well you sleep to how long you might live, from the relationships you form to the career path that calls to you. But more than that, we'll explore what it means to have a personality at all, this stable yet shifting pattern of thoughts and behaviors that travels with you through every moment of your life. If you enjoy these explorations of the mind and would like to join us for more, you can like and subscribe below. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments, but for now, settle in. Let your breathing slow, your shoulders drop, and allow your mind to drift gently through these ideas like a boat on a calm evening river. Let's begin our journey into the heart of who we are. To understand where the Big Five came from, we need to travel back through time to the early days of personality psychology. The story begins not in a laboratory, but in the pages of a dictionary. In 1936, 2 American psychologists named Gordon Allport and Henry Odbert had a curious idea. They wondered if the words we use to describe each other might hold the key to understanding personality itself. So, they did something that seems almost impossibly tedious by today's standards. They went through Webster's dictionary, page by page, and compiled every single adjective that could be used to describe observable and relatively permanent traits in people: kind, anxious, imaginative, reliable, irritable, warm. By the time they finished, they had gathered 4,504 words. It was an enormous list, far too large to be practically useful, but it represented something profound. The lexical hypothesis, as it came to be called, suggested that the most important individual differences in human personality had, over time, become encoded in language. The traits that mattered most to us as social beings were the ones we developed words to describe. In the 1,940 seconds, a British-American psychologist named Raymond Cattell took Allport and Odbert's massive list and began the painstaking work of reducing it. He added terms from psychological research, eliminated synonyms, and used statistical techniques to group related traits together. Eventually, he whittled the list down to 171 personality markers, and then further reduced these to 16 fundamental personality factors. Cattell's work was groundbreaking, but other researchers kept finding that an even simpler structure kept appearing in the data. In 1961, 2 Air Force psychologists, Ernest Tupes and Raymond Crystal, analyzed Cattell's data using different statistical methods. What they found was striking. 5 factors kept emerging again and again across different samples and studies. They called these factors surgency, agreeableness, dependability, emotional stability, and culture. If you squint a little, you can see the seeds of what would become the modern Big Five, though the names would change over time. But here's the curious thing about scientific discoveries. Sometimes they arrive before the world is ready for them. Tupes and Crystal's work was published in a technical Air Force report, and for nearly 2 decades, it sat largely unnoticed in the scientific literature, like a letter sent but not yet opened. Then, In the late 1970 seconds and early 1980 seconds, a psychologist named Louis Goldberg independently rediscovered the five-factor structure. Goldberg started his own lexical project, following in the footsteps of Allport and Allport, and once again, five broad dimensions emerged from the data. He called them the Big Five, a name that was deliberately humble, suggesting these weren't the only ways to think about personality, but they were five big, important ones. Around the same time, two other researchers, Robert McCrae and Paul Costa, were developing what they called the five-factor model. They created detailed questionnaires to measure these five dimensions and began accumulating evidence that these traits were stable across the lifespan, had biological foundations, and appeared across different cultures. By 1981, at a symposium in Honolulu, four prominent personality researchers came together to review the available personality tests. Despite working independently and using different methods, they had all arrived at remarkably similar conclusions. Five broad traits kept appearing. The convergence was too strong to ignore. Throughout the 1980 seconds and 1990 seconds, the Big Five model gained widespread acceptance in personality psychology. It wasn't because a single charismatic researcher championed it, but because the evidence kept accumulating from multiple directions, like streams flowing down a mountain to form a single river. Today, the Big Five is often called the gold standard of personality assessment. It has been validated across cultures and languages, examined in relation to brain structure and function, and linked to countless life outcomes. As recently as 2016, research continues to refine and deepen our understanding of these five dimensions. The journey from Allport's dictionary to today's sophisticated models took nearly 80 years. It's a reminder that understanding something as complex as human personality requires patience, collaboration, and the willingness to follow the evidence wherever it leads, even if it takes decades to get there. Before we dive deep into each of the five traits, it's worth pausing to consider what personality actually is. We use the word casually, saying someone has a great personality or no personality, but psychologically speaking, personality is something we all have. It's the relatively stable pattern of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that makes you recognizably you across time and situations. Think about it for a moment. If a friend described you to someone who had never met you, certain words would probably come up. Perhaps they'd say you're thoughtful, or spontaneous, or quiet, or enthusiastic. These descriptions point to something real and consistent about who you are. You might behave differently at work than at home, but there's still a recognizable thread running through all your behaviors, a signature that's uniquely yours. The Big Five represents one way of organizing this signature into meaningful dimensions. These aren't discrete categories, like sorting people into buckets labeled extraverted or introverted. Instead, they're continuous dimensions, like colors on a spectrum. Most people fall somewhere in the middle of each dimension, with smaller numbers at the extremes. What makes the Big Five special is how they emerged. They weren't invented by a single theorist with a particular view of human nature. Instead, they were discovered through careful analysis of language and behavior. You might think of it as if personality itself carved out these five channels over thousands of years of human interaction, and psychologists simply learned to recognize the patterns that were already there. The five dimensions each capture something fundamental about how people differ from one another. Openness to experience describes how curious and imaginative you are, how drawn you are to novelty and complexity. Conscientiousness reflects how organized and disciplined you are, how much you plan ahead and follow through on commitments. Extraversion captures how social and energetic you are, how much you seek out stimulation and company. Agreeableness describes how cooperative and compassionate you are, how much you prioritize harmony and care for others. And neuroticism, sometimes called emotional stability at its opposite pole, reflects how prone you are to negative emotions like anxiety and sadness. These 5 dimensions don't capture everything about personality. There are other valid frameworks, and within each dimension there are nuances and subfacets. But together, they provide a remarkably comprehensive map of the terrain of human individuality. The beautiful thing about this framework is that it honors both our commonality and our uniqueness. We all can be described along these 5 dimensions, which points to something universal in human nature. But each of us occupies a different point along each dimension, creating a nearly infinite variety of personality profiles. Like 5 sliders on a mixing board, each set to a different level, the particular combination creates something entirely distinct. Understanding your personality isn't about putting yourself in a box. It's about gaining a language to describe the patterns in your life, to understand why certain situations energize you while others drain you, why you naturally gravitate towards some activities and away from others. It's about recognizing that the way you are isn't the only way to be, and that's not just okay, it's beautiful. Personality exists at the intersection of biology and experience, nature and nurture woven together so tightly that trying to separate them becomes almost impossible. Your genes contribute roughly 40 to 60% of the variation in personality traits. Studies of twins raised apart have shown. But that leaves substantial room for environment, for the accumulated impact of experiences, relationships, culture, and choices. And here's what makes personality both stable and changeable. The patterns tend to remain recognizable across years and decades. Someone who's extroverted at 20 will likely still be relatively extroverted at 50 compared to their peers. But the absolute levels can shift. Life experiences can nudge us along these dimensions, sometimes dramatically. Becoming a parent might increase conscientiousness. Therapy might reduce neuroticism. Travel and education might enhance openness. The stability of personality provides a sense of continuity, a thread of self that persists through all the changes life brings. Yet the capacity for change means we're not imprisoned by our temperaments. We can grow, adapt, evolve. The person you are today carries echoes of who you've always been, but also bears the marks of everywhere you've traveled and everything you've learned. Now let's turn our attention to the first of the 5 traits: openness to experience. If personality were a house, openness would be the windows, determining how much of the outside world you let in, how much novelty and complexity you're drawn to explore. People high in openness have minds that seem perpetually curious, always reaching out toward new ideas, new experiences, new ways of seeing. They're drawn to art and beauty, to abstract concepts and philosophical questions. They daydream often, letting their imagination wander through possibilities. They appreciate complexity and nuance, seeing shades of gray where others might see only black and white. Openness encompasses 6 narrower facets, each adding texture to the broader trait. Active imagination, sometimes called fantasy, describes the tendency to create rich inner worlds. Aesthetic sensitivity reflects a deep responsiveness to beauty in art, music, poetry, or nature. Attentiveness to inner feelings means noticing and valuing your own emotional landscape. Preference for variety, or adventurousness, shows up as a desire to try new foods, travel to new places, and break from routine. Intellectual curiosity drives a hunger for knowledge and ideas. And psychological liberalism manifests as a willingness to challenge authority and conventional wisdom. Research has found fascinating connections between openness and other aspects of mind and brain. People higher in openness tend to score somewhat higher on intelligence tests, though the relationship is modest. More striking is the connection to creativity. Across numerous studies, openness emerges as the personality trait most strongly linked to creative achievement in arts and sciences. There's even evidence that openness changes visual perception. In one clever study, researchers showed people ambiguous images that could be seen in two different ways, like those optical illusions where you can see either a vase or two faces, depending on how you look at it. People higher in openness were better able to see the two patterns merge together, simultaneously holding both interpretations in mind. It's as if their minds are more comfortable with ambiguity, less rushed to resolve things into a single clear answer. The neuroscience of openness is still being mapped, but intriguing patterns have emerged. Openness appears to be linked to the neurotransmitter dopamine, which plays a crucial role in exploration, approach behavior, and response to novelty. People higher in openness show greater connectivity in the default mode network, a set of brain regions that activate during daydreaming, imagination, and thinking about possibilities. In everyday life, openness shapes countless choices and experiences. It influences what you read, the music you listen to, whether you prefer familiar comfort or exotic adventure. It affects how you approach problems, whether you reach for tried and true solutions or seek out innovative alternatives. It even shows up in political attitudes, with research finding that cultural conservatism tends to correlate with lower openness, though the relationship with economic views is less clear. Think about how openness might manifest on an ordinary day. A highly open person might choose an experimental restaurant serving cuisine they've never tried, or pick up a book on quantum physics just out of curiosity, even though it's far from their field. They might take a different route home just to see new streets, new houses, new trees. They might spend an evening lost in a piece of music, noticing layers and textures, feeling something ineffable move through them. In conversation, high openness might show up as comfort with abstract discussions, a willingness to consider unconventional viewpoints, or excitement about ideas for their own sake. At work, it might manifest as enthusiasm for new projects, innovative approaches to old problems, or the ability to see connections across different domains. Someone lower in openness might find these tendencies puzzling or exhausting. Why try a new restaurant when you know exactly what you like at your favorite place? Why read about quantum physics if it's not directly useful? Why take a different route when the familiar one works perfectly well? To them, the appeal lies in mastery, depth, reliability. They might prefer to read the same beloved books multiple times, extracting new meaning with each reading, rather than always seeking something new. Recent research from 2024 found that high levels of openness can even protect against certain cognitive vulnerabilities. In one study, openness appeared to counteract the negative effects of age-based stereotype threat on memory, helping people implement more efficient but resource-demanding cognitive strategies. It's as if the mental flexibility associated with openness provides a kind of psychological resilience. Like all the big five traits, openness isn't inherently good or bad. Very high openness can sometimes make it hard to focus, as the mind flits from one fascinating possibility to another. It can make routine tasks feel stifling, like wearing a coat that's several sizes too small. People very high in openness might struggle with jobs that require doing the same thing the same way day after day. They might start many projects but finish few, always drawn toward the next interesting thing before completing the current one. Lower openness, on the other hand, brings a different kind of strength, an appreciation for tradition, for the tested and true, for depth over breadth. People lower in openness often excel at developing deep expertise in specific domains, perfecting skills through repetition, and maintaining valuable traditions. They provide stability and continuity in families, organizations, and communities. The ideal level of openness depends on your life circumstances and what you're trying to accomplish. But there's something poignant about openness, a kind of eternal reaching. People high in this trait seem to carry a sense that there's always more to discover, more beauty to find, more ideas to entertain. It's an orientation toward life as an endlessly unfolding mystery, one that invites perpetual exploration. And in that reaching, that openness to experience, there's a kind of courage, a willingness to be changed by what you encounter in the world, to let new experiences reshape your understanding of what's possible. Let's move now to conscientiousness, a trait that might seem less romantic than openness, but is, in its own way, just as profound. If openness is about what you let in, conscientiousness is about what you do with it, how you organize yourself to move through the world with purpose and care. Conscientiousness is the trait of being responsible, careful, diligent. It's about self-discipline and the ability to delay gratification. Highly conscientious people are organized. They make plans and follow through on them. They're punctual, reliable, the ones you can count on to do what they say they'll do. They think before they act, considering consequences before diving in. This trait shows up in remarkably consistent ways across different life domains. In school, conscientiousness is one of the strongest predictors of academic achievement, sometimes even outweighing intelligence. Conscientious students attend class, complete assignments on time, study thoroughly. They might not always grasp concepts most quickly, but their persistence and discipline carry them far. The pattern continues into the workplace. Across nearly every occupation studied, conscientiousness predicts job performance. Whether you're a manager or a mechanic, a teacher or a technician, being organized, dependable, and hardworking contributes to doing your job well. A meta-analysis examining 98 different variables found that conscientiousness showed positive relationships with performance in virtually all of them. Perhaps most striking are the health outcomes associated with conscientiousness. People higher in this trait tend to live longer. They're more likely to exercise regularly, eat nutritious foods, get enough sleep, and avoid risky behaviors like smoking or excessive drinking. When faced with a health challenge, they're more likely to follow their doctor's advice, take medications as prescribed, and stick with rehabilitation programs. Recent neuroscience research has begun to uncover the brain basis of conscientiousness. One fascinating study found that individual differences in conscientiousness were linked to the volume of certain brain regions, particularly in the lateral prefrontal cortex, an area involved in planning and self-control. The trait appeared to serve as a mediator between brain structure and academic performance, suggesting that conscientiousness represents, in part, the personality expression of these neural systems. But conscientiousness isn't simply innate. Evidence suggests it develops through childhood and can be meaningfully cultivated through targeted efforts. Self-regulation in early childhood, the ability to control impulses and manage emotions, tends to foster greater conscientiousness later in life. Academic motivation and internalizing social norms also contribute to its development. Research on specific behaviors helps paint a clearer picture of what conscientiousness looks like in daily life. Highly conscientious people finish tasks on time, arrive to meetings punctually, and don't skip responsibilities on a whim. They create to-do lists and actually use them. They clean up after themselves and keep their spaces organized. These might seem like small things, but they add up to a life that runs more smoothly, with less chaos and more follow-through. The everyday manifestations of conscientiousness are everywhere once you start looking. It's the person who maintains a consistent bedtime even on weekends, who tracks their spending and sticks to a budget, who sets reminders and actually follows through on them. It's keeping your workspace organized so you can find what you need when you need it. It's writing things down instead of trusting you'll remember. It's building habits and systems that make good behavior easier and bad behavior harder. In relationships, conscientiousness shows up as reliability. Conscientious friends remember your birthday, show up when they say they will, and follow through on promises. Conscientious partners share the domestic load without needing constant reminders, think ahead about what needs to be done, and can be counted on during difficult times. This reliability builds trust, one of the foundations of secure relationships. In the workplace, conscientiousness manifests in countless ways. It's the employee who arrives prepared for meetings, meets deadlines consistently, and produces thorough, careful work. It's the manager who thinks strategically about the future, sets clear goals, and monitors progress toward them. Research has found that across 98 different workplace variables examined, conscientiousness showed positive relationships with performance in virtually all of them, a remarkably consistent pattern. Like all traits, conscientiousness has its shadow side. Very high conscientiousness can tip into rigidity, perfectionism, or an inability to relax and go with the flow. Highly conscientious people might struggle to be spontaneous, to seize unexpected opportunities that don't fit their plans. They might be harder on themselves when they fall short of their own high standards, turning self-discipline into self-criticism. There's also a potential for conscientiousness to become almost compulsive. The person who can't enjoy a vacation because they're worried about all the work waiting back home. The parent whose high standards create pressure that feels suffocating to their children. The perfectionist who spends so much time polishing details that they never actually complete and share their work. Lower conscientiousness isn't simply a deficit either. It brings a kind of flexibility, an ability to adapt when plans change, to not get too attached to particular outcomes. Less conscientious people might be more comfortable with ambiguity and mess, more able to enjoy the present moment without worrying about what needs to be done next. They might be more playful, more spontaneous, more able to seize unexpected opportunities that arise. Some of the most creative people throughout history have been relatively low in conscientiousness. The artist whose studio is chaotic but who produces brilliant work. The writer who keeps irregular hours and misses deadlines, but captures something profound. Too much organization and routine can sometimes stifle the kind of free-flowing exploration that leads to innovation. But across the spectrum, conscientiousness represents something deeply human, the capacity to envision a future different from the present and to marshal your behavior toward making that future real. It's the trait that lets you plant seeds in spring, knowing you won't harvest until fall, that helps you study for exams weeks away, that enables you to save for retirement decades in the future. It's the psychological machinery of delayed gratification, of choosing the harder path now for greater rewards later. In a world that constantly tempts us toward distraction and immediate gratification, conscientiousness is the quiet voice that says, "Not yet. Finish what you started. Remember what you're working toward." It's not always a comfortable voice, but it's often a wise one, pointing the way toward growth and accomplishment and the deep satisfaction of following through. There's a particular kind of peace that comes from being able to trust yourself, from knowing that when you commit to something, you'll see it through. That's the gift that conscientiousness offers. Now we turn to extraversion, perhaps the most immediately visible of the big five traits. Extraversion is about energy and enthusiasm, about how you orient yourself toward the social world and how much stimulation you seek. Highly extroverted people are often described as the life of the party. They're talkative, energetic, assertive. They love being around people, draw energy from social interaction, and tend to experience positive emotions more frequently and intensely. They seek out excitement and stimulation, preferring the buzz of activity to quiet solitude. But extraversion is more textured than that simple description suggests. Research has identified two major subfacets of the trait. Assertiveness reflects incentive, reward, sensitivity, the drive toward goals, and the willingness to take charge and influence situations. Enthusiasm captures consummatory reward sensitivity, the enjoyment derived from achieving goals or imagining their achievement. You can be high in one facet and moderate in the other, creating different flavors of extraversion. The neuroscience of extraversion has been extensively studied, and fascinating patterns have emerged. Extraversion appears to be fundamentally linked to the brain's dopamine system, particularly the pathways involved in reward processing and motivation. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that promotes exploratory behavior, helps us learn from rewards, and drives approach toward pleasurable stimuli. People higher in extraversion appear to have more reactive reward systems. Brain imaging studies show increased activity in regions like the ventral striatum and orbitofrontal cortex when they anticipate or receive rewards. It's as if their brains may be more attuned to potential pleasures in the environment, more readily noticing opportunities for positive experience. One early and influential theory came from the psychologist Hans Eysenck, who proposed that extroverts have chronically lower baseline cortical arousal because their brains are naturally understimulated. He suggested they seek out stimulation from the environment to reach an optimal level of arousal. While this theory has been refined and complicated by later research, the basic insight that extroverts seek stimulation remains valid. The social aspect of extraversion can't be overstated. Highly extroverted people tend to have larger social networks, spend more time in social activities, and report greater satisfaction from social interactions. They're often skilled at initiating conversations, reading social cues, and creating fun group experiences. Research suggests that extraversion serves the goals of connecting with others, entertaining people, and simply having fun. But here's something important to understand. Introversion, the opposite pole of extraversion, isn't a deficit. Introverts aren't failed extroverts. They simply have different optimal levels of stimulation. What feels energizing to an extrovert might feel overwhelming to an introvert, whose nervous system may be more sensitive to stimulation. Introverts can be perfectly happy and socially skilled. They just need more downtime to recharge after social interaction. The relationship between extraversion and well-being is complex. Extroverts tend to report higher levels of happiness and positive emotion in their daily lives. But this doesn't mean introverts are unhappy. Rather, they may find their positive emotions through different routes, perhaps through deep one-on-one conversations rather than large parties, through solitary pursuits that bring flow and satisfaction. The daily experience of extraversion can be quite distinct depending on where you fall on the spectrum. A highly extroverted person might wake up looking forward to the social interactions the day will bring. They might feel energized by a crowded commute, finding it more interesting than draining. They might seek out colleagues for lunch, prefer working in busy coffee shops to quiet libraries, and feel their best after spending an evening with friends. They tend to think out loud, processing ideas through conversation. They might call a friend to talk through a decision rather than sitting quietly with their thoughts. In meetings, they're often the first to speak, comfortable thinking on their feet and building on others' ideas in real time. An introverted person's day looks quite different. They might wake up cherishing the quiet morning hours before having to engage with others. They might find the crowded commute draining, arriving at work already somewhat depleted. They might prefer lunch alone with a book, relishing the chance to recharge. They might do their best thinking in quiet spaces and feel exhausted after a long social event, even if they enjoyed it. Introverts tend to think before speaking, processing internally before sharing their ideas. They might prefer email to phone calls, written communication to spontaneous conversation. In meetings, they might say less but think more, sometimes having their best insights after the meeting ends when they've had time to reflect. Research on the brain basis of extraversion helps explain these differences. Studies using electroencephalography, or EEG, have found that extroverts show different patterns of brain activity in response to rewards. One study found that extraversion modulates something called the reward positivity, a brain signal that reflects dopaminergic signaling when rewards differ from expectations. It's as if extroverts' brains are particularly attuned to potential rewards in their environment, constantly scanning for opportunities for positive experience. Extraversion shapes countless aspects of how we live. It influences career choices, with extroverts often gravitating towards sales, teaching, entertainment, leadership roles, or other people-focused fields where their social energy becomes an asset. Introverts might be drawn to research, writing, technical work, or other roles that allow for more independent, focused work. It affects how we spend our free time, whether we seek out concerts and gatherings or prefer quiet evenings with a book. Extroverts might feel restless and lonely after too much solitude. Introverts might feel overwhelmed and desperate for peace after too much socializing. Both experiences are valid, neither is better or worse. They simply reflect different optimal levels of stimulation. It even impacts our digital behavior, with research finding that more extroverted people tend to have more active social media presences, posting more frequently, having more online friends, and engaging more with others' content. For extroverts, social media might feel like an extension of their social drive. For introverts, it might feel exhausting or optional. Like all the traits, extraversion exists on a spectrum, and most people fall somewhere in the middle, sometimes called ambiverts. You might be extroverted in some contexts and more introverted in others, depending on the specific situation and how much energy you have. You might be socially engaged at work but crave solitude in your free time, or vice versa. There's a particular poetry to extraversion at its best. It's the trait that helps create community, that breaks through the awkwardness of strangers and forges connections. Extroverts are often the ones who organize the gatherings, who reach out to new people, who keep social groups alive and vibrant. They bring energy and enthusiasm that can be contagious, lifting the mood of entire rooms. They remind us that we're social creatures, that there's joy to be found in shared laughter and collective experience. But equally important is the quiet strength of introversion, the capacity for deep focus, for reflection, for listening more than speaking. Introverts often notice details that others miss, think deeply about complex problems, and form deep one-on-one connections. They remind us that not all valuable contributions are loud, that thoughtfulness and depth matter as much as energy and enthusiasm. Both orientations toward the world have their place, their gifts. The key is understanding your own nature and finding the environments and rhythms that let you flourish. We arrive now at agreeableness, the trait of compassion and cooperation. If extraversion is about how much you engage with the world, agreeableness is about how you engage. Whether you approach others with warmth and trust or with skepticism and competitiveness. People high in agreeableness are kind, sympathetic, cooperative. They're considerate of others' feelings, quick to help, slow to judge. They value harmony in relationships and will often compromise to avoid conflict. They tend to think well of people, to give others the benefit of the doubt, to look for the good rather than assuming the worst. Research has found that agreeableness is strongly associated with empathy, the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. This connection holds even when researchers statistically control for the other big five traits, suggesting there's something specific about agreeableness that relates to this other-oriented emotional resonance. Brain imaging studies have revealed that agreeableness correlates with activity in regions involved in social cognition and emotion processing. The temporoparietal junction, which plays a role in perspective-taking and theory of mind, shows different patterns of activation in more versus less agreeable people. It's as if highly agreeable individuals have brains that are particularly attuned to the social and emotional signals from others. The behavioral signatures of agreeableness appear consistently across contexts. Highly agreeable people are more likely to engage in helping behavior, to volunteer their time, to donate to charity. They're better at resolving conflicts through compromise and collaboration. In relationships, they report greater satisfaction and tend to have more stable, lasting partnerships. A fascinating meta-analysis examined the role of agreeableness in various outcomes and found that it positively predicts conflict resolution ability, cooperative decision-making, and long-term relationship satisfaction across different cultural contexts. The trait seems to oil the machinery of social interaction, making it easier to work together toward common goals. But agreeableness, like all the traits, has its complexities. Very high agreeableness can sometimes mean difficulty standing up for yourself, a tendency to let others take advantage of your good nature, or trouble being direct when directness is needed. Highly agreeable people might avoid necessary confrontations, agree to things they don't truly want, or suppress their own needs to maintain harmony. Lower agreeableness isn't simply selfishness or cruelty. It can manifest as healthy skepticism, the ability to question others' motives, or the willingness to prioritize your own needs. Less agreeable people might be more comfortable with conflict, seeing it as a sometimes necessary part of honest relationships rather than something to avoid at all costs. They might be more direct in their communication, less concerned with sparing feelings if they think truth is more important. The relationship between agreeableness and well-being is interesting. Being highly agreeable is associated with having good relationships, which is one of the strongest predictors of happiness. But there's also research suggesting that moderate levels of agreeableness, rather than very high levels, might be optimal for some outcomes, allowing you to be cooperative without becoming a doormat. Agreeableness appears to be fundamentally important to psychological well-being, predicting not just positive relationships, but also mental health and positive emotional states. This makes sense when you consider how social we are as a species. The ability to get along with others, to cooperate and care, has been essential to human survival throughout our evolutionary history. In the workplace, agreeableness has nuanced effects. It predicts better teamwork and fewer interpersonal conflicts, but it's less consistently linked to individual job performance than conscientiousness. In some competitive fields, very high agreeableness might actually be a disadvantage, making it harder to engage in the self-promotion or aggressive negotiation that success requires. There's something deeply moving about agreeableness at its core. It represents our capacity for compassion, our ability to extend ourselves toward others with kindness and understanding. In a world that can feel harsh and competitive, highly agreeable people are often the ones creating pockets of warmth and care, reminding us that we don't have to go through life as isolated individuals competing for scarce resources. In daily life, agreeableness shapes how you navigate social situations. A highly agreeable person might notice when someone seems upset and ask if they're okay. They might volunteer to help a colleague with a challenging project, even when their own schedule is full. They might smooth over tensions at family gatherings, finding common ground and redirecting conversations away from conflict. They tend to assume good intentions, interpreting ambiguous behaviors charitably. If someone cancels plans last minute, they might think they must have had a good reason, rather than they don't value my time. This generous interpretation helps maintain relationships, but can sometimes mean they miss warning signs of people who are genuinely unreliable or unkind. Less agreeable people approach social situations differently. They might be more attuned to potential exploitation or deception. They're quicker to call out unfairness, even if it creates tension. They might prioritize directness over politeness, believing that honest communication, even when uncomfortable, is more respectful than gentle dishonesty. In negotiations, these differences become particularly apparent. Highly agreeable people might leave money on the table, accepting less favorable terms to maintain positive relationships. Less agreeable people might drive harder bargains, willing to risk some social discomfort for better outcomes. Neither approach is universally superior. The right strategy depends on the situation and your priorities. A 2021 meta-analysis by researchers, including Graziano, examined how agreeableness predicts various outcomes across different cultural contexts. The findings showed that agreeableness positively predicts conflict resolution ability, cooperative decision-making, and long-term relationship satisfaction. These patterns held across diverse cultures, suggesting something fundamental about how agreeableness facilitates social harmony. Highly agreeable people help create the social fabric that holds communities together. They're often the ones checking in on neighbors, mediating disputes, creating welcoming environments where people feel valued and heard. They volunteer at higher rates, contribute to charitable causes, and generally orient their lives around helping and connecting. They demonstrate that strength can be soft, that influence can flow through gentleness rather than force. But the lesson of agreeableness isn't that everyone should maximize this trait. It's that cooperation and competition, warmth and skepticism all have their place. The key is finding the balance that serves your values and circumstances, being able to extend compassion while also maintaining boundaries, to trust while still using discernment. The most effective approach might be what some call flexible agreeableness, the ability to be warm and cooperative as a default, but also to stand firm when the situation demands it. Now we come to neuroticism, perhaps the most misunderstood of the big five traits. The name itself can sound pathological, but neuroticism isn't a disorder. It's simply a dimension of normal personality variation, one that reflects how prone you are to experiencing negative emotions. People high in neuroticism tend to experience anxiety, sadness, irritability, and emotional instability more frequently and intensely than others. They might worry more, perceive more threats in their environment, and find it harder to bounce back from setbacks. Their emotional weather is more turbulent, with stronger storms and fewer clear skies. Some researchers prefer to talk about this dimension in terms of its opposite pole, emotional stability. Framed this way, people low in neuroticism or high in emotional stability maintain their equilibrium more easily. They're calm under pressure, slow to anger, quick to recover from disappointments. Their emotions are steadier, less reactive to the ups and downs of daily life. Recent research has delved into exactly what neuroticism looks like in day-to-day experience. One study found that people higher in neuroticism don't just experience more intense negative emotions, they also experience greater variability in their negative emotions. It's not just that they feel worse on average, it's that their emotional landscape is more volatile, with bigger swings from moment to moment. The neuroscience of neuroticism appears to involve the amygdala, a brain structure involved in processing emotions. Research suggests that people higher in neuroticism may have more reactive amygdalae, responding more readily to certain stimuli. You might think of it as their brain's awareness system being particularly attuned, noticing potential concerns more quickly. Research has found connections between neuroticism and various aspects of well-being. People higher in neuroticism may experience certain emotional challenges more readily, particularly during stressful periods. But it's important to understand that neuroticism itself is simply a personality dimension, not a disorder. Most people high in this trait live full, meaningful lives. They simply experience emotions with more intensity and variability as part of their natural temperament, and importantly, this sensitivity has potential strengths as well. Some researchers suggest that higher neuroticism might confer advantages in certain situations. The tendency to anticipate problems and worry about potential threats could help with planning and risk avoidance. The emotional sensitivity might make you more attuned to subtle social signals, more aware when something is wrong. It's possible that moderate levels of neuroticism, rather than very low levels, might actually be optimal for navigating a complex world. The serotonin system appears to play a key role in neuroticism. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter involved in mood regulation, and research suggests that variations in serotonin functioning are associated with differences in neuroticism. Higher serotonin levels tend to correlate with lower neuroticism or greater emotional stability. In terms of life outcomes, higher neuroticism is associated with certain patterns. Research finds connections with somewhat lower average life satisfaction and more sensitivity to stress. People higher in neuroticism may find self-confidence requires more conscious cultivation, as self-critical thoughts can arise more readily. But there's also a kind of depth that can come with neuroticism. People who feel emotions more intensely, both positive and negative, might have richer inner lives, more nuanced understanding of emotional experience. Some of the world's greatest artists, writers, and musicians have been highly neurotic, channeling their intense feelings into creative expression. The relationship between neuroticism and life outcomes can also change over time. Research shows that neuroticism tends to decrease as people age, particularly from young adulthood through middle age. This might reflect increased emotional regulation skills, more stable life circumstances, or changes in brain function. The daily experience of high neuroticism can feel more intense. Small setbacks that others might notice briefly can linger in awareness. A comment from a colleague might stay with you longer. An upcoming event might draw more of your thoughts. Uncertainty can feel less comfortable. The mind may spend time considering various possibilities, including less favorable outcomes. But there's also a dimension of neuroticism that's about sensitivity rather than just negativity. People higher in this trait often have finely tuned emotional awareness. They might notice subtle shifts in others' moods, pick up on social tensions that others miss, or have deep, empathetic responses to others' suffering. This emotional sensitivity, while sometimes painful, can also be a source of insight and connection. Some research suggests that moderate levels of neuroticism might actually be adaptive in certain contexts. The tendency to anticipate problems can motivate better planning and preparation. The anxiety about social interactions might lead to more careful, thoughtful communication. The sensitivity to criticism might drive continuous improvement. It's possible that too little neuroticism could mean missing important warning signs or failing to prepare adequately for challenges. Understanding neuroticism can be liberating, particularly if you're high in this trait. It helps you recognize that your tendency toward anxiety or sadness isn't a personal failing, but a dimension of your personality, one that has biological underpinnings. This knowledge can reduce self-blame and open the door to self-understanding. Research has found various approaches that some people find helpful. Some find that talking with a therapist provides useful perspectives on their thoughts and patterns. Others discover that mindfulness practices can create some distance from intense emotions, allowing them to observe feelings without being completely swept away. Regular exercise has been associated with reduced anxiety and improved mood in many studies. Sleep quality appears to matter as well, since sleep deprivation tends to amplify emotional reactivity. Strong social connections often provide both practical support and emotional buffering. There's also evidence that neuroticism tends to decrease with age, particularly from young adulthood through middle age. Whether through neurobiological maturation, accumulating life experience, developing better coping skills, or simply facing feared situations enough times to realize they're survivable, many people find that their emotional reactivity mellows over time. For those lower in neuroticism, who enjoy emotional stability, there's a different set of strengths and challenges. They might weather stress more easily, maintaining equilibrium when others are falling apart. But they might also miss emotional cues, underestimate risks, or fail to take threats seriously enough. Very low neuroticism can sometimes mean a kind of emotional flatness, missing the full range and depth of emotional experience. There's a poignancy to neuroticism, a kind of tender vulnerability. People high in this trait feel the world more keenly, both its sorrows and its threats. They carry a heavier emotional load, and that takes courage to bear, even if it doesn't always feel courageous from the inside. In their sensitivity lies both their struggle and their gift, an emotional richness that, when channeled well, can deepen relationships, fuel creative expression, and attune them to subtleties others might overlook. Now let's step back and look at how these 5 traits relate to each other and to the brain more broadly. While each trait has its own character and correlates, they don't exist in isolation. They interact with each other and emerge from overlapping biological systems. Researchers have discovered that the Big Five can be organized into 2 higher-order factors, or metatraits, that capture even broader patterns. These are called stability and plasticity. Stability combines agreeableness, conscientiousness, and emotional stability, which is neuroticism reversed. Together, these 3 traits reflect the ability to maintain consistent, predictable, pro-social functioning. Plasticity combines extraversion and openness. These traits both involve approach toward novelty and rewards, exploration of the environment, and cognitive and behavioral flexibility. They represent the tendency to engage with and adapt to new information and experiences. This organization points to something fundamental about personality's biological basis. Stability appears to be primarily associated with the neurotransmitter serotonin, which generally promotes avoidance behavior and inhibitory control. People with higher serotonin functioning tend to be more emotionally stable, more agreeable, and more conscientious. Plasticity, on the other hand, is linked to dopamine, which promotes exploratory behavior, approach toward rewards, and cognitive flexibility. Higher dopamine functioning is associated with greater extraversion and openness, both of which involve seeking out and engaging with rewarding stimuli. Of course, the biology is more complex than just 2 neurotransmitter systems. Multiple brain regions contribute to each trait. As we've discussed, extraversion involves the ventral striatum and reward pathways. Neuroticism is linked to amygdala reactivity. Openness correlates with connectivity in the default mode network and prefrontal cortex. Agreeableness involves the temporoparietal junction and other social cognition areas. Conscientiousness relates to lateral prefrontal regions involved in planning and self-control. What's remarkable is that these brain differences are visible even in structural scans. Studies using voxel-based morphometry, which measures the volume of gray matter in different brain regions, have found correlations between personality traits and brain anatomy. Your personality isn't just about how your brain functions, it's actually reflected in the physical structure of your brain. But the relationship between biology and personality isn't one way. While genetic factors account for roughly 40 to 60% of the variation in personality traits, environmental factors also play crucial roles. And importantly, brains are plastic, meaning they can change in response to experience. This means that while you might have certain personality predispositions based on your genetics and early development, your traits can shift over time, particularly in response to significant life experiences or deliberate efforts to change. The brain regions associated with personality can be strengthened or modified through practice and learning. Research has documented predictable patterns of personality change across the lifespan. On average, people become more conscientious and agreeable and less neurotic as they age from young adulthood through middle age. These changes likely reflect both neurobiological maturation and the accumulating experiences of adult life, taking on responsibilities, forming long-term relationships, and learning from successes and failures. The interaction between different traits also matters. The same level of extraversion might manifest differently depending on your level of neuroticism. An extroverted person who's also highly neurotic might seek social interaction, but also worry intensely about how they're being perceived. An extroverted person who's emotionally stable might engage socially with more ease and confidence. Understanding the neuroscience of personality doesn't reduce the rich complexity of human individuality to mere brain chemistry. Rather, it provides a glimpse into how the physical machinery of the mind gives rise to the felt experience of being a person. It's humbling and awe-inspiring to realize that the traits that make you distinctly you emerge from the intricate dance of neurotransmitters, the architecture of neural networks, the firing patterns of billions of cells. Yet somehow, from this biological substrate emerges something that feels irreducibly personal, the sense of having a self, a consistent way of being that persists through time and circumstances. The neuroscience doesn't explain that feeling away. If anything, it deepens the mystery of consciousness and selfhood, showing us just how much complexity underlies every moment of experience. The question of whether the Big Five traits are universal across cultures has been central to personality psychology. If these 5 dimensions really represent fundamental aspects of human personality, they should appear not just in Western industrialized societies, but across diverse cultures around the world. The evidence largely supports universality, but with important nuances. The Personality Profiles of Cultures project, one of the most ambitious cross-cultural studies ever conducted, examined the 5-factor structure in 50 cultures using the Neo-Personality Inventory, a widely used measure of the Big Five. The results were striking. The factor structure was clearly replicated in most cultures and was recognizable in all of them. Other large-scale studies have found similar patterns. The Big Five have been identified in personality ratings across more than 50 societies spanning 6 continents. Importantly, the traits appear not just in self-reports, but also in observer ratings, when people are asked to describe someone else's personality. This suggests the patterns aren't just artifacts of how people think about themselves, but reflect observable behavioral regularities. Even the developmental trajectory of traits shows cross-cultural consistency. In countries as diverse as the United States, Germany, Italy, Portugal, Croatia, and South Korea, researchers have found similar age-related patterns. People tend to increase in conscientiousness and agreeableness, and decrease in neuroticism, openness, and extraversion as they move from young adulthood to middle age. This suggests that both biological maturation and the common challenges of adult life shape personality in similar ways across cultures. But the picture isn't one of complete uniformity. Recent research has raised important questions about the limits of the Big Five's universality. Much of the cross-cultural research has relied on urban, educated populations, sometimes referred to by the somewhat tongue-in-cheek acronym WEIRD: Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic. These populations represent only a small fraction of human diversity. Studies with less educated or pre-literate populations have yielded more mixed results. Research with the Tsimane people in the Bolivian Amazon, for instance, didn't find strong support for the Big Five structure. Instead, the data suggested a simpler, two-factor structure oriented around pro-sociality and industriousness. This doesn't necessarily mean the Big Five don't apply to the Tsimane, but it raises questions about whether the model fully captures personality variation in all cultural contexts. Several studies have identified personality dimensions that seem specific to certain cultures and aren't fully captured by the Big Five. For example, researchers studying Asian cultures have identified an additional dimension, sometimes called honesty-humility, which involves sincerity, fairness, and modesty. This led to the development of the Hexaco model, which includes 6 rather than 5 broad traits. One interpretation of these findings is that the Big Five capture important universal aspects of personality, but not everything. Different cultures might emphasize or elaborate on certain distinctions more than others. The traits that matter most in a particular social context are likely to be the ones that become most elaborated in that culture's language and concepts. It's also worth noting that while the structure of traits may be universal, the levels of traits can vary between cultures. Some cultures, on average, score higher on certain traits than others, though there's always substantial variation within any culture. These cultural differences might reflect different social norms, values, or even genetic variation between populations. The question of universality touches on deep philosophical questions about human nature. Are there fundamental dimensions of personality that all humans share, or is personality largely shaped by culture? The evidence seems to suggest a middle path. Research indicates certain basic dimensions of individual difference that emerge across many cultures, possibly rooted in our common biology and the shared challenges of social living. Yet how these dimensions are expressed, valued, and elaborated appears to vary with cultural context. This perspective honors both our common humanity and our beautiful diversity. We share certain basic psychological dimensions, which makes it possible to recognize ourselves in people from radically different cultures. Yet the specific ways these dimensions play out, the behaviors they lead to, the meanings they carry, can vary richly across the world. For the individual, understanding the cross-cultural research can broaden your perspective on personality. The traits you carry aren't purely products of your culture, but neither are they entirely independent of it. You're a unique individual, situated within a particular cultural context, expressing universal human capacities in your own distinctive way. Let's turn now to one of the most fascinating aspects of personality research: how these traits shape the actual outcomes of your life. The Big Five aren't just abstract dimensions psychologists use to categorize people. They have real, measurable impacts on health, relationships, career, and overall well-being. Start with health and longevity. Among the most robust findings in personality science is the relationship between conscientiousness and health outcomes. People higher in conscientiousness tend to live longer, and the effect size is substantial, comparable to the impact of socioeconomic status on health. Why does conscientiousness predict longevity? Partly, it's about health behaviors. Conscientious people are more likely to exercise regularly, eat nutritious diets, get adequate sleep, and avoid risky behaviors like smoking or excessive alcohol consumption. They're more likely to wear seatbelts, get regular medical checkups, and follow their doctor's advice. These behaviors accumulate over a lifetime, protecting health and preventing disease. Research suggests that conscientiousness may also have more subtle physiological associations. The self-control and emotional regulation that often accompany conscientiousness might be linked to differences in stress responses. The organized, planful approach conscientious people take to life may create environments with less chaos and unpredictability. Neuroticism shows a different pattern. Higher neuroticism is associated with certain health challenges. This may relate to several factors. People higher in neuroticism experience stress more intensely, which can affect well-being over time. They may also perceive their health somewhat differently, sometimes seeking more medical guidance. Interestingly, changes in personality predict changes in health. People who become more conscientious over time tend to see improvements in their health behaviors and outcomes. Those who decrease in neuroticism often experience better mental health and fewer stress-related problems. This suggests personality isn't just a static predictor, but an ongoing influence that shapes health trajectories. Relationships represent another domain where personality plays out powerfully. Agreeableness is perhaps the strongest predictor of relationship satisfaction and stability. Agreeable people are easier to get along with, more forgiving, more willing to compromise. They create warmer, more supportive relationships. Increases in agreeableness over time predict higher marital satisfaction, while decreases in neuroticism are associated with lower divorce rates. But it's not just agreeableness that matters. Research using large longitudinal datasets has found that multiple traits influence relationship outcomes. High conscientiousness predicts more stable long-term relationships and lower divorce rates, perhaps because conscientious individuals are more committed to following through on their relationship commitments. Lower neuroticism also benefits relationships, as emotional stability makes it easier to navigate conflicts without escalation. Career success shows intriguing patterns across the Big Five. Conscientiousness again emerges as a strong predictor, correlating with job performance across virtually every occupation studied. Whether you're an accountant or an artist, a nurse or an engineer, being organized, dependable, and hardworking helps you do your job well. But different traits matter for different aspects of career success. Conscientiousness predicts both intrinsic career success, how satisfied you are with your work, and extrinsic success, objective markers like income and prestige. Neuroticism negatively predicts extrinsic success, possibly because emotional instability makes it harder to navigate workplace politics or persist through setbacks. Extraversion shows more nuanced effects, predicting success in roles that involve persuasion, leadership, or social interaction. Changes in personality can affect career trajectories. Increases in extraversion and conscientiousness have been linked to higher career satisfaction and lower unemployment over time. This raises the intriguing possibility that deliberately cultivating certain traits might improve career outcomes, though more research is needed to establish causation. Well-being and happiness show consistent relationships with personality. Across numerous studies and cultures, extraversion and low neuroticism, or emotional stability, are among the strongest personality predictors of subjective well-being. Extroverts tend to experience more positive emotions in daily life and report greater life satisfaction. Emotionally stable people tend to experience less negative emotion and distress. Why extraversion predicts happiness is interesting to consider. Researchers have proposed several possibilities. It might be partly about the reward system differences we discussed earlier. Extroverts' brains may be more responsive to rewarding experiences, potentially allowing them to derive more pleasure from events. It could also relate to behavior, as extroverts often seek out social connections and activities that research has linked to well-being. But the relationship between personality and happiness isn't deterministic. Introverts and even somewhat neurotic individuals can and do lead happy, fulfilling lives. The key may be finding environments and lifestyles that fit your personality, what psychologists call person-environment fit. An introvert might find happiness through different means than an extrovert, through deep friendships rather than large social networks, through meaningful work rather than social excitement. One fascinating study used 7 longitudinal datasets with a combined sample of nearly 82,000 people to examine how personality traits predict outcomes across health, education, career, finances, relationships, and civic engagement. The results showed that personality dispositions are associated with outcomes at the individual level, health and well-being, at the interpersonal level, quality of relationships, and at the social institutional level, occupational choice and performance, community involvement. What emerges from all this research is a picture of personality as a powerful shaping force in life. Your Big Five profile doesn't determine your destiny, but it does influence the paths you take, the challenges you face, and the strengths you can draw on. Understanding your personality can help you make choices that align with your nature, seek environments where you can thrive, and develop skills to manage the challenges your particular trait profile presents. It's also worth noting that personality can change, particularly through deliberate effort and significant life experiences. If certain traits are creating difficulties in your life, whether it's high neuroticism undermining your well-being, or low conscientiousness hampering your career, there's evidence that targeted interventions can help shift these traits in healthier directions. The research on personality and life outcomes ultimately points to something hopeful. While we each have a particular personality profile that creates tendencies and predispositions, we're not prisoners of these traits. Understanding them gives us knowledge, and knowledge provides leverage for change, for finding the right fit between who we are and how we live. As we near the end of our journey tonight, let's pause to reflect on what we've discovered. The Big Five personality traits: openness, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism represent one of psychology's most well-validated frameworks for understanding human individuality. They emerged not from a single theorist's imagination, but from decades of research across cultures and continents, a scientific consensus built on converging evidence. What makes the Big Five special is how they honor both the universal and the particular. We all can be described along these 5 dimensions, pointing to something fundamentally shared in human nature. Yet each of us occupies a unique point along each dimension, creating an almost infinite variety of personality profiles. Like 5 colors that can be mixed in countless proportions, the Big Five create the palette from which individuality is painted. We've seen how these traits are rooted in biology, linked to neurotransmitter systems and brain structures, yet remain open to change through experience and effort. We've explored how they predict real outcomes in life, shaping health, relationships, careers, and well-being in measurable ways. We've considered their presence across cultures, largely universal yet nuanced by context and values. Perhaps most importantly, we've gained a language for understanding ourselves and others with more compassion and precision. When you know that your tendency toward anxiety reflects higher neuroticism, a dimension of normal personality variation with biological underpinnings, it can ease self-judgment. When you understand that your preference for solitude might stem from introversion rather than social dysfunction, it can validate your need for quiet. Similarly, understanding others' personality can foster empathy. The colleague who seems scattered might be low in conscientiousness, not deliberately disrespectful. The friend who declines social invitations might be introverted, not rejecting you. The family member who seems anxious might be high in neuroticism, not choosing to worry, but wired toward vigilance. The Big Five remind us that there's no single right way to be human. High and low levels of each trait come with both strengths and challenges. Openness brings creativity, but can also bring difficulty with routine. Conscientiousness enables achievement, but can also rigidify into perfectionism. Extraversion creates social connection, but might make solitude uncomfortable. Agreeableness fosters harmony, but can make conflict avoidance problematic. Emotional stability provides equanimity, but might miss emotional nuance. Each trait profile creates a different life, with different joys and struggles, different paths to fulfillment. The goal isn't to score high on all socially valued traits, an impossible aim anyway. It's to understand your particular constellation of traits, work with your nature rather than against it, and develop the flexibility to adapt when your natural tendencies don't serve you. There's something quietly profound about the fact that these 5 dimensions emerged from language, from the words we use to describe each other. It suggests that personality isn't just a scientific construct, but a lived reality that humans have recognized and named across cultures and centuries. The traits that matter most to us as social beings, the ways we consistently differ from each other that shape how we interact, survive, and thrive, these found their way into language long before psychologists began studying them. As you drift towards sleep tonight, or simply let these ideas settle gently in your mind, you might reflect on your own personality. Where do you fall on each dimension? How have your traits shaped your life? The choices you've made, the challenges you've faced, the strengths you've developed. There's no judgment in this reflection, just curiosity and perhaps a growing sense of self-understanding. You are a unique individual, but you're also part of the broader human family, connected to all people through these shared dimensions of variation. In your openness or conscientiousness, your extraversion or agreeableness, your neuroticism or emotional stability, you carry something ancient and universal, expressed in your own distinctive way. If you found this exploration helpful and would like to join us for more nighttime journeys into psychology and the human mind, please consider subscribing to the channel. You can also share your thoughts and reflections in the comments below. But for now, there's nothing else you need to do. Let yourself settle more deeply into rest. Let your breathing slow and your thoughts soften. The mysteries of personality will still be there tomorrow, waiting to be explored further. For now, simply rest in the knowledge of who you are, this particular, irreplaceable person with your own unique way of being in the world. Sleep well, and good night.